Peter, this is, you can hear it in my voice already. I'm so psyched and excited to have a chat with you because, as I said to you before, you're one of those commentators that I just think of as synonymous with so many big moments. So thank you so much for your time. And one of those big moments that I have to ask you about straight away, the commentary on the Roma game was just amazing. Tell me, how much had you planned that?
I hadn't planned it, Ben. Of course I hadn't. Of course I hadn't. You have to understand a couple of things here. First of all, a commentator has to remember that he's only as good as the moment he's given. I didn't score that goal. Kostas Manolas scored that goal. Okay, so I happen to be the lucky fella who was sat in the stand when he scored that goal. That's the first thing. So it's not my moment, it's his moment. Secondly, people do ask me whether I had prepared that goal.
Of course.
Now, there's nothing more arrogant than quoting yourself back, but I think somewhere in there it's all about Roman gods and Greek gods and Roman hills and blah, blah, blah. To suggest that I had pre-scripted that is to suggest by implication that I had a line prepared for any one of the 18 players turning out for Roma that night to score an equaliser against Barcelona against the odds in the Olympic Stadium that night. If you stop and think about it, it's preposterous to think that I would have sat up for 5 hours the night before preparing a line for each of them.
But maybe a testament to your amazing comms.
But no, that would be nonsense. And honestly, the first time it occurred to me that night, because don't forget that the nation was watching Liverpool-Man City that night.
It's a really good point.
And I went into Roma against Barcelona in what looked to be a dead game, knowing that everybody else was watching Liverpool-Man City, actually very relaxed and thinking this will come and go. Nice to have an evening in Rome, going home at the end of it. And it wasn't until Roma got to within one goal, actually during the game, I thought, blimey, if they score again, this is going to be something. And of course, because I was removed from what else was happening, it hadn't particularly occurred to me that Liverpool-Man City was now dying and that people might be turning over and thinking, actually, it's more exciting to watch the other one. And they were, as it turned out. And so the first time I really got into a sort of mental space where I was thinking, we're on the cusp of something that might be a bit special, was when Roma got to within one goal. And so I didn't script anything, it's too late then, but I'm just getting into an area where I'm thinking, be ready to be a bit beyond the norm, that's all.
Right,
that's
okay.
It's a bit like when Aguero scored the goal that won the league. Again, you can be prepared for that day. That day I was prepared for Manchester City to win the league, because of course they were going to win at home to QPR. But anything you were prepared for then, the sort of final whistle and City are champions, actually, in the light of what actually happened, would have been lame.
Of course.
You know, you can't just stick with that. So it was just about getting into a mental space that allowed you to know that this wasn't just any old goal. Yeah. That's all.
And you said there that you kind of like half quote it back to yourself. Do you ever watch back to sort of get almost, not give yourself feedback, but almost just to kind of see what did I say in that moment?
I've been made to watch it back.
Right.
I certainly haven't gone and looked for it because I worry it makes me cringe, really.
Really?
Yes, all these things do. All these things do.
No
because
way.
I think partly they make me cringe and partly they make me panic because I think, what if it had gone wrong? What if it was rubbish? What if I got it wrong? I think that about the Aguero goal. I think that about the Manolas goal. What if I'd got it wrong? What if I hadn't done it very well? What if none of this had happened? And I worry about the Manolas goal because actually, my first words when the ball hits the net were, what were they? Roma have risen from their ruins or whatever. And those were words that came out of my mouth, truthfully, to buy me 4 or 5 seconds because I hadn't got a clue who'd scored the goal. You know, really? It was a big centre half at the near post, getting a flick.
Well, there's bodies everywhere, isn't there?
Bodies everywhere, and I'm thinking, show me who scored. And so I've got to buy a few seconds. So I come up with a line that buys me a few seconds until I can see the back of his shirt or the front of his face and say, oh, it's Manolas. So
whereabouts are you sitting at the time? Are you
over the
sort of
halfway line?
line?
Yeah.
So you're quite away as well.
Oh yeah, and the Roma's terrible. The Olympic Stadium.
Yeah,
I mean, it's lovely, but it's huge, and you're miles from anywhere. I remember doing game back in the day for ITV there, when Cristiano Ronaldo scored against Roma for Manchester United. Header, and he. I always quote this when people say, how do you prepare for commentaries? And I say, well, the most important thing is player identification. Before anything else, you've got to know who's who. And in this day and age, and even back then, a decade or so ago, one of the key things to look for is boot colour. Because you've got orange boots and pink boots and green boots and whatever. And oddly enough, that night when Ronaldo scored, coming through the crowd with a header, all I saw of him was his whatever colour boots they were, maybe red, whatever.
Yeah, very bright. I remember.
I could have got Ronaldo wrong, and people think, how can you get Ronaldo wrong? The most famous player in the world, or one of. And the truth is that in the moment you can, and so anything that gives you a clue is worth looking for, particularly when you're somewhere the size of the Olympic Stadium at Rome, where you're a long, long way from the action.
And I think, like you said as well, there's perhaps on behalf of the viewer, there's a reluctance to give any leeway, right?
Yeah.
Because, well, you're the commentator.
You should know.
You've got this. Like, you absolutely must know that's Ronaldo that's climbed above everyone there.
Correct. And you've only got a pair of eyes like everyone else.
Yeah.
And if you think about it as a punter, if you go and watch a football match, how often when you go and watch your team play, is a goal scored, and then the people around you, whether it's for or against your team, you're looking and saying, who scored that? Who got that?
Yeah.
And that is happening, and it happens in press boxes as well. The journalist goes, who got the final touch? And the commentator is expected to know. And of course doesn't always, and a bad day at the office let's face it, the more important things, it's not saving people's lives, but a bad day at the office for a commentator is when you get the goal scorer wrong. And once in a while, it happens.
I'm going to touch wood that it doesn't happen to you after this interview. But have you ever had one of those?
Yes. Yeah, one or two. I mean, yeah. Not particularly notable ones, only I would remember them. I remember one at Boa Vista in the Champions League where I called the wrong Boa Vista name. And certainly there have been moments where, more acutely than the Roma one I'm just mentioning, where I've been scrabbling around thinking, help, no idea. And it really informs the way you prepare. Actually, particularly if you're doing a game which involves teams with whom you're not familiar, the number one thing, never mind all the facts and figures, the number one thing is to know who the players are. That's what the punter wants from you most of all. Who's got the ball now? And certainly when you're doing FA Cup ties, smaller teams, that's essential. If you get the chance to go and watch them play before, you really, really must. Because I can. I'm not going to, no names, no pack drill, but I can watch the first 5 minutes on the telly of a cup tie involving an underdog, and I can tell you whether the commentator is watching this team for the first time or not.
Really?
Yeah. And I suspect other commentators can know that of me. And it's no good if a goal scored, or even if it's not scored, and you get a full close-up of a player and you think, which one's he? Now I'm not claiming any superiority here, it's happened to me, but I think you need to be doing everything you can to ensure that doesn't happen.
So you mentioned another goal, obviously, that was very popular as well, that people talk about as being synonymous with you, which was the Aguero goal.
Not just me, by the way, there's others as well.
Well, that was what I wanted to ask. What people might not know in the UK is that your commentary was going out in hundreds, a lot of other countries, right? And people think of you as the voice of that goal. They're staggering. That was to me, because I was working on it at the time. That was the commentary I think of.
Yeah. It's funny because obviously in this country, quite rightly, Martin Tyler absolutely nailed it, and he did a brilliant commentary on it, absolutely brilliant. Funnily enough, sometime last season I was on a train back from a Manchester City game, and Martin came and sat in the same carriage.
Really?
And we got off at the same station, and we were climbing over, it was one of these full football trains, we were climbing over Manchester City fans, and some Manchester City fan who'd had a bit to drink sort of woke up as the train pulled into the station, and he saw Martin. He said, "You Martin Tyler?" And Martin said, yeah, I am. And we're very polite and nice with him, and this said, "Martin, thanks for the Aguero goal." And as we got off the train, I said, Martin, they think you scored. They think you scored. And, you know,
thanks to the
Aguero, he didn't score it, and he'd be the first to say that. He commentated on it brilliantly, but he didn't score it. And nor, for the bits of the world where I did it, did I score it.
So where is that? Because there's an art there, though. Like where? So where, in your mind, where do you fit into the equation? So we've got the player scores, the crowd goes absolutely bananas. There's a moment there, and something's happening, right, between the fans, between the players, between the management, between like the wider world watching us. Where do you fit into that?
I think it's important from a point of view of humility to know that really you don't fit into it. All you are is an eavesdropper.
Okay.
You are reflecting that moment. It's not your moment, you're reflecting that moment for anybody who happens to be watching or listening to you. And in the really exceptional moments, which are very scarce, you know, most games are standard games which come and go and nobody notices. But in those really exceptional moments, you just have to hope that some sort of instinct kicks in and the right words come out, because the exceptional moments are kind of where you earn your corn, because you can't be ready for them. You know, you cannot expect someone to win the Premier League in the 94th minute of the final game or whatever, or to come back from 3 behind against Barcelona or whatever. You can't expect those moments. You can't really prepare for them, and you just have to hope that what comes out is right. And that's in a sense why I very often don't watch them back, because it makes me go cold, because there's nothing I could have done to be ready for that. And what makes me go cold is the thought that that instinct might not have kicked in, and I might have made a right pig's ear of it. I might have done. I might have shouted the wrong name, for heaven's sake. You know, anything could have happened, and those are the live on your nerve moments.
So for you, it's all about research then, right? It's all about making sure that when that moment arises, that you're in the best possible position that you could be in.
Yeah, well, it's research up to a point, but no amount of research prepares you for that, actually. I mean, by the 94th minute of the final game of the season, you know who all the players are. This is not a moment for saying this is the first time since 1963 that somebody has scored in the 94th minute. This is just a moment for reflecting the emotion of the day. So there's nothing. You know, people ask about whether you're ready with those words or not. You can't be ready with those words. If you were ready with those words at moments like that, it would sound plastic. It's got to be authentic. You know, and as I say, on the Manchester City day, yeah, I don't deny that I had words ready for the final whistle in a standard sort of way, because Manchester City, as I say, were bound to beat QPR.
They had to,
They
right?
had, well, of course, QPR were playing not to be relegated that day, and were poor at the time, and City were very, very good. They were going to beat QPR. So yes, I was ready for a final whistle saying whatever it was about Manchester City winning the Premier League for the first time since goodness knows when. And I was ready for the moment Vincent Kompany lifted the trophy. But in the moment, I suppose if I claim any credit, it is for recognising that what I had ready was simply nowhere near what was required. So mentally tearing it up and going with what actually did occur.
Are you looking for, as a commentator, are you just looking forward to the next big moment, or are you always looking on the horizon for the big games, or to you is it just exciting to be at any
Just exciting to be there, honestly. I mean, I don't want to be disingenuous. Of course, the big games are the ones that really pump you.
Yeah.
But I also hope that I don't lose sight of the fact of how lucky I am. I love coming to football matches like thousands of others do. And I'm always wary, if you come out of what you perceive to be a poor game, if you come out of a poor game at, say, Old Trafford, okay, 75,000 people have paid to be at that game. It's Manchester United 0, Burnley 0, whatever. What you have to bear in mind, I think, is that of that 75,000 crowd, all the partisan fans, and all of us who are fans understand this, whilst it was 0-0, they're actually on the edge of their seat, because you know what it's like to be a fan. We might score, they might score. It's actually exciting even when it's boring. For them, as a neutral, we might look at it and think, blimey, when's this going to finish? But for them, I know when I'm watching my team, and it's 0-0 and it's awful, we might score, they might score. It's right on edge, and that is going to define my mood walking out of that game. So it's not been boring for them. Of that 75,000 crowd at Old Trafford, and you can do it proportionally everywhere, maybe 10,000 are there for the first time or for a treat for their 10th birthday, because they've saved up for 6 months, because they've just come over from Hong Kong to see Manchester United play for the one and only time in their life. And so to be less than excited when for a big proportion of the people at the game it is the event that they've looked forward to, even if to you and I who are blasé about the Premier League it's just another game. For every game of Premier League football is an event for a lot of people, and I think it's right, when you're privileged enough to be the one who's shouting the names, to understand that. You know, it's all too easy when you're in the media bubble to become cynical and blasé, but every game, even if on the final day of the season you're at 9th against 10th with nothing on it, thinking, when's this over? There are, in that 40,000 crowd, a lot of people who couldn't wait for this day, and so you'd be wrong to forget that.
What a gorgeous sentiment. That's such a, like you say, I think I've probably covered hundreds of games, and I don't think I'd ever thought about it in that way. That maybe that's someone's birthday present.
Yeah.
That is someone's. That they might never go to another Premier League game in their life. So when you sort of are putting together whatever it is you're putting together, that's something that you have to take into account. And I guess it's not a coincidence that your commentary is always at a level where the audience, the crowd, anyone watching at home can get into it, right?
Well,
people can feel the energy.
I hope so. I mean, I think, I'm not saying anybody does this, but I think if you went into a game without tapping into that and were tempted to say, well, here's another Premier League game for you, I'm not sure what it's all about, you know, then what's the point, really? I mean, you know, you've got to be excited by it, I think. And that's not to be, I hope, journalistically weak. I mean, if it is a poor game technically, I think you've got to be ready to acknowledge that. But as I say, even the poorest of poor games has people hanging on the outcome. You know, a dreadful game is still supported by two partisan sets of supporters who want that one scrappy goal that goes in off someone's backside to be their goal, and so it's always exciting.
How much do you allow yourself to enjoy the international game? Because obviously you've covered a lot of the World Cup and you covered a lot of the England games. Is that different for you from a commentary?
Yeah, it is different. I mean, a World Cup is a bubble. It is a real bubble.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
It's bizarre, yeah.
It's like nothing else.
Correct. It exists in its own space. Obviously, the last World Cup was fantastic because, again, I do it for the sort of the global feed, which means I'm not allowed to be partisan, which is quite handy, really. Although it's an odd one because we're privileged to speak the English language, which is the global language. And I think I'm still right in saying, I could be completely out of date, but I think out in the world, England is still an iconic football nation, and that actually quite a lot of people want England to win if their nation can't. So it's not wrong to be excited on England's behalf, whilst acknowledging that there are obviously opponents who themselves want to win as well. No, the World Cup in Russia was exciting, and I'm sure, like everyone else, I had got to the stage by the semi-final where I was thinking of, oh my word, what if this actually happens? And I could get myself to the state of thinking, how am I going to hold back the tears? You know, because I could think of my sons at home, and I think, what if I am saying England have won the World Cup? What?
Yeah.
You know, and
unfortunately,
and sadly, and obviously when they were 1-0 up in the semi-final, and they were still 1-0 up after, thinking, oh my lordy, you know, I'm about to say England are in the World Cup final, and I know it's sentimental, Tosh, but I was thinking of my sons back home. I was thinking of everyone back home. And not that they were hearing my version of it, but that's nothing to do with me being the commentator. I'm just thinking of, like everyone else, thinking of my eldest in the pub and all of those things. And actually, one of my sons rang me on the day of the semi-final and said, "Dad, you will hold yourself together, won't you? You will, because this could be a really embarrassing moment in your career." Because I'm a crier. It doesn't take much for me to cry.
Oh, really?
No, I cry at anything.
What sort of stuff do you cry?
I can cry if it's sad on Coronation Street, I assure you. I can certainly cry around a football match. I really can.
What games have brought you to tears? Have you had any in particular? Because I know mine instantly off the bat. The one that's kind of
go on then. You tell me.
96, first tournament, Gareth Southgate.
Yeah.
And Barry Davis on comms. Yeah. It's burned.
No.
That is just burned into like my sort of consciousness.
Yeah.
He sort of says, "And now Gareth Southgate," and it was. You listen to it, like you said. Actually, you listen to it back, and you're like, it's almost like it was so scripted.
Yeah.
But he just. I think the thing that caught me was that in that 5 seconds, he just summed up what every single person felt, without having to say too much, because it was just a guttural, like, oh no,
exactly.
I can't believe it.
No, he was brilliant, and he was very sparing with words, Barry Davis, and was very proud of that. He was a great believer, as we all are to some extent, though not necessarily to his extent, in letting the moment talk for itself. So he was good about that, but in a way that, as we all know, I mean, I'm only repeating what everybody understands, but that Gareth Southgate penalty miss played to such a large extent into this World Cup. And I've worked with Gareth, and he's such a terrific man. So when I feel teary, it tends to be the kind of human thing. Yeah. I feel teary more in the happy moments than the sad, really. I think, wow, I'm so pleased for him. And I was so happy for Gareth, and if he'd gone all the way, he would have been a big reason why, because he's just a fabulous human being. And I'm very keen that whatever happens with him in England, I mean, I'm very keen he wins something, of course, but if and when it all comes to an end, I just hope he doesn't get chewed up and spat out, as so often happens to England managers.
It's a great quote from him, wasn't there, that he loves the game, but he doesn't like the business. Is that
something like that? Yeah,
something on those lines.
Exactly.
And I thought that's just so accurate, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. That's exactly it. Because he's a human being, and we're in danger of sort of faux philosophy here. But I mean, it's only sport, and I think he gets that. But sport, on the other hand, is very important to people, and I just hope that the business around it, because of the inevitability, it's like being the Prime Minister, ultimately you lose the election. Ultimately, as the England manager,
at one point your approval rating changes.
Yeah, your approval rating changes. Exactly, very well put. His approval rate will probably at some stage change, because at some stage he'll lose a football match he shouldn't, because that's how it goes. And I just hope that he doesn't get scarred by it. I really do, because he's too nice a man for that to happen.
Moving forward, what do you look at in the calendar? What are you looking at as the next thing?
Well, we're in the middle of a fantastic title race. So I must admit, I keep looking at the final day of the season and working out who's playing where and what it's all going to mean. So I'm excited about that, and from a genuinely neutral perspective, because the team I follow won't win the league, I can say that I hope they're all in it on the last day.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, I want a fantastic last day. That would be thrilling for me. I'm really looking forward to going and working on the Nations League, because I want Gareth to lift a trophy in the summer. I know it won't be one of the trophies, but just
a trophy.
That would be
anything.
And I just think that the country is going to buy into that.
Yeah.
It's going to be a couple of really exciting days. So that's going to be fun.
Because you've done. I mean, you worked on the World Cup final. You were commentating on France, Croatia, and.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it was an interesting World Cup final, but I wonder whether once you've done that, are you then thinking, I hope I get that opportunity again?
Oh, always, yes. I am. I wish I wasn't, actually, because you should just be able to enjoy it and think, okay, if that never happens again, I've done it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there's a bug. that says, oh, I want to do the next one as well.
yeah.
I wanna do
Do
the
you
next-
get competitive with it?
Well, it is competitive. It is competitive. There's no, not hostile.
No, of course.
But I'm aware that there are plenty of other very, very good commentators who also want to do that.
None as good as you.
Well,
None as good as you.
they're absolutely plenty as good as me. And so you have to be grateful when your moment comes, actually. And if it doesn't happen again, well, at least I have done it.
Yeah.
You know, but I'd love to be at the next World Cup final and so on and so on. And I hope, like Martin Tyler, he would forgive me for saying I hope, the wrong side of 70 now and still as utterly enthusiastic about football as he was when he was 7, you know, and I think that's a great example for us all. And if I'm still going past 70 and I'm that enthusiastic, that'll tick my box.
Amazing. Thank you so much, mate.
Top man.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, Ben.
Oh, that was magical.